The Upper Left Barrel Racing Podcast is brought to you by the Washington State Barrel Racing Incentives.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Kaylee.
We are the hosts of this podcast and the founders of the WSBRI.
On this podcast, we interview special guests, tell unique stories, and talk about all things Northwest barrel racing. Our mission is to grow the sport we love and to shine a light on all of the talent and value up here in the Northwest. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey guys, this is my 85th time trying to get this right for you, so please don't fast forward. Want to tell you really quickly about our sponsors, amazing companies. We are so thankful for them, so please take a listen and use them if you can. First off, we have Evergreen Equine Vet. Mainly their reproductive specialists, Mike Howell and Jerry Washburn. They will get you a baby if you want one. So if you have plans of a future champion, use them to get that baby. EEVP.net is their website. The other company I want to tell you about really quick is the Bony Pony. If you have ever been into this store in Mount Vernon, Washington, it is rows and rows of every type of cowboy boot, every type of hat, the latest fashions. You and your horse will look amazing if you go to the Bony Pony store or bonypony.com to get yourself all ready for the competition season coming up. So please support our sponsors. They support you. We'll just jump in and introduce you guys. We're here with Mike and Jerry. They are the reproductive specialists of Evergreen Equine Veterinary Clinic. You guys, it's been going for a while with Mike, but you guys have joined forces and started kind of a reproduction center for us up here in the Northwest of Washington. Mike, how long have you been a vet in this area? Mike Howell, everybody is who we're with. How long have you been a vet in this area, and when did you start focusing on reproductive medicine?
Well, I graduated from Washington State University in 1992 and came to Mount Vernon at that point and worked with the practice there for 4 or 5 years. And then we started Evergreen Equine after that. So reproduction interest with bovine and horses has been mine from the very start. You know, in my undergrad, I was interested in bovine reproductive work. And then when I got through with vet school, I began to do more training in equine reproduction, and I've been doing it ever since.
Okay. And then Jerry Washburn is our other vet with us here today. And Jerry, you had your own practice for quite a while in this area. And then when did you start working with Mike?
Well, I graduated from vet school in 78. And when did I start working with Mike? Mike actually externed with me before he got into vet school. So we have a long relationship. I had solo practice in this area for over 40 years now. And several years ago, Mike and I started a cooperative thing with the Repro Center. And then just this last year, I joined Evergreen Equine. We seemed like that was the right thing to do since we've been working together so much. And so now it's all one practice, and the Repro Center basically just going on like it has been. And we make a good team. We do everything about the same.
Well, yeah, if you trained him, right?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was a good full circle for me to go from working with Jerry as an assistant to getting through veterinary school and eventually working with him as a colleague and now at the same practice. Yeah,
that's great. So yeah, it would take two, I would think, to do it the way you guys do it, because you live at home, but then travel in for work. And this reproductive stuff is like a 24/7 type of deal.
Yeah.
So that's great. That makes sense that you joined forces and took this on. And that's why you're so successful now. And you've got quite the practice up here in Savannah, Washington. And in fact, you were successful for me.
Yeah.
Your little voodoo dance worked, Jerry. I don't know if Mike told you.
He did.
Yeah. So we want to use this podcast today for everyone in our area in Washington, in the whole United States, that owns a horse that might want to try to have a baby out of their mare. There's a lot to know when you make this decision as a mare owner, and so many questions that you could possibly have. So we're hoping this episode will answer a lot of questions. And maybe there's people on the fence about breeding their mare and they will decide to after learning this, or maybe there's people on the fence that will decide not to because it is quite the process. So that's what we want to cover today. Thank you for being here with us. And I think we'll just get started with, tell us, in your opinion, how do you start? Like, what's the place to start when you have a mare you really love and you want to breed her?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. It kind of depends on the situation. At the repro center, we're doing pretty much all manipulated reproduction, where we're not doing any live cover. We're not doing pasture breeding, all of the old stuff. The mares come in and they're either going to be bred with artificial insemination from a stallion that's on the farm, or artificial insemination with fresh cooled semen, or artificial insemination with frozen semen. And then on top of that, we offer embryo transfers. So
why would you just why should somebody come and do AI or any of the options you've listed and not do like pasture breeding or live cover?
Most of the reason for that is because of the value of the stallions. They can breed a lot more mares that way. With the ship semen, the fresh cooled and the frozen, you can breed to a stallion that's any place in the country. With frozen semen, any place in the world, where it's impractical to ship the mare to that stallion. So a lot more stallions available, a lot safer. And since we are monitoring the heat cycles and the reproductive status of the mare, the success rate is higher.
I think we'd reiterate the safety part of this. We want things to be safe for the mare owner, the mare, and the veterinarian. And live covers can be pretty crazy events, even in the most skilled hands. And so there's less and less of that going on these days. And with the ease of semen collection and shipment, it just facilitates a lot safer process.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I wouldn't want to turn my expensive mare out with a stallion
No.
and hope she came back in one piece, because that doesn't always happen. So it totally makes sense. So
And
what is step? Go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You wouldn't want your mare to kick some really expensive stallion and put him out of commission.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen some mean stallions. I think it could go either way.
I've got a mean mare, so.
Okay. So what is step one then as a mare owner? What do they need to do first?
I would say the mare owner needs to decide first and foremost, is my mare suitable for breeding? And we could go over some of those questions later. And am I prepared for this financially and with the time? And have I selected a stallion? Those are probably the first things to go through. And once you've decided those things, you could get with your veterinarian either at home or bring the mare to the reproduction center, and we could go through a series of questions and start a pre-breeding evaluation on your mare.
And what are some of those questions? Like if I have a mare at home, what are some things that you guys like to work with as far as age, health of the mare? What sort of things make for a good option for a mare to be bred?
Well, mares can be bred anytime from their 3-year-old year to their 23-year-old year. Now, reproductive efficiency or success in the mare rapidly starts to decline into their late teens. Doesn't mean that it's impossible, but if you bring us a 23-year-old mare, she's far less likely to have a live foal than if you bring us a 4 or 5-year-old mare. So we need to make sure that what we're starting with is realistic in the first place, so your expectations are realistic.
Yeah. What about, does it matter if they've had a baby before? Does that make them more likely to have a successful pregnancy again if they're a little bit older, or does that matter?
So older maidens are more difficult to get in full. So basically, if we're starting on a mare that's never had a baby after 15-ish, then it becomes more of a project. Not necessarily impossible, but the success rate goes down and it tends to be more work.
And the younger maiden mares, of course, they all need to be bred for the first time. So maiden mares do get pregnant.
Yeah.
It's just your mare has had a baby or two, and we know its breeding history has been successful. We'd feel better giving you an answer that, yes, there's one less question in the equation.
Yeah.
We should be able to get a baby for you.
So what about, so let's say I've had a conversation with a vet. Now you guys are specializing in reproduction, which makes me think the everyday lameness vet might not be the person to talk to about reproduction. Is that true?
Yeah, for the most part.
Without throwing anybody, I mean, it's just, you don't go to a heart specialist about your foot problem, right? So is it kind of the same? You want to ask a professor, someone that specializes in like you two do?
I think you'll have better luck in the long run. I think with anything, if you go to the person that's doing the most of them and they're successful, that's the right person to be with. Now,
Right.
Plenty of other veterinarians are capable of doing the reproductive work. They just may not be as practiced as we are. And if with practice and time, anybody gets good at anything.
Right.
Attention.
And it is a big time commitment thing. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. And there's some vets that don't want to get up at midnight to breed a mare, don't want to get up in the middle of the night to help a mare foal. And so, you got to find somebody that's committed to that part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So now, go ahead.
Let me comment just a little bit on picking a stallion. I'm always having owners ask me, well, how do I pick a stallion? And one of my little tricks I tell them is to very critically look at their mare and list her 10 biggest faults. Mm-hmm. And then to look at the stallion that they're interested in. And after they get through all the pretty pictures and, oh boy, he moves pretty, and to list his 10 biggest faults, and don't breed fault to fault because you're probably going to get it.
That's great advice. Yeah. I've never heard anybody be so blunt about that, but I would say you're right. Yeah, I would say you're definitely right. That's great advice. And I think stallion owners would appreciate that, and mare owners, because it does a stallion owner no good to have a baby out there with a fault. So that's great. Thank you for that. Okay. So you and I have had a conversation. You've decided, yeah, we can give it a try breeding your mare. What are you going to do first as the vet for that mare?
Generally, I like to ask the person, when do you want to have a baby? So we know when to start the project. Because if you're not worried about having a foal early in the year, there's really no reason to start looking at your mare in January. Mm-hmm. So let's get the time frame set. And then if you decide, okay, I'd like to have a mare in June, then we could start looking at your mare a couple of months before that. And then we'll start into the process of the pre-breeding exam, which basically starts with a history. So we find out whether your mare's got reproductive history, moves on to a physical exam that we perform, and then a reproductive exam with the ultrasound.
Mm-hmm. So for people that don't want to Google, how long is a mare pregnant for? So like if you want a June baby, would you be
20 days less than a year? So it's easiest to count back 20 days from the last breeding date.
Okay.
Basically average of 345 days.
That's the average? Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Normal is 325 to 365. But just, giving the average 345.
One way to sort of remember that in a funny way is 11 months, 11 days, 11 hours.
Oh.
It worked out that way. It's close.
That's convenient.
You guys are the smartest. Man, I've never heard this stuff, and I haven't seen that on Google. I like it. I like it a lot. That's easy to remember. Okay, so you've picked out when you'd like to have a foal on the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, is it kind of not dangerous, but if you say I want one in June, there's no guarantee that first AI is going to work, so how late realistically can you breed?
Till we go on vacation.
Unfortunately, we're still breeding in September.
Really? Wow.
So mares in the Northwest, mares, and anywhere in the United States, but the further north you get, the more of the seasonal influence you have. So mares are what we call seasonally anestrus, meaning most mares stop cycling in the late fall and in the winter. So that dictates sometimes when we're going to start breeding your mare, because if we start too early in the spring, she may not be cycling well, and we call that the transitional period. But to get to your point, that when are you going to have a foal, you better factor in a couple of breedings that may not be successful, because we don't have 100% success every time we cover the mare. So
and
people to start a month or a month and a half earlier than they think they want to, just to give us room to try and hit the window they're looking for.
So in determining when you want a baby, besides the seasonal polyestrus that Mike talked about, you also need to think about when's that baby going to be born, and does the owner have the facility to manage a newborn baby in January or February when the weather's so bad? Or on the other end, if you have a baby born in September or October, that baby's going to be being weaned during the height of winter. So, so a little bit of planning ahead on that aspect also.
Yeah, that's great advice. Not to just think about when you want the baby to arrive, but when you need to separate the baby from the mom. That's really good advice. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to, we've decided we're going to try, we bring the mare to you. Do you guys do an ultrasound to see where she's at in her cycle? How do you get started?
Generally, we'll go over the history, and I'll ask you, have you seen the mare in heat lately? Some mares, and probably less than 50% of mares, will really show the owners when they're in heat. But that'll help us to get some history so we can minimize the amount of ultrasounds and cost that we have into breeding your mare. So once we establish that, we will ultrasound the mare and see if we can decide based on what we see if the mare is, one, cycling, and two, is she in the place in the heat cycle where we're expecting her to be? And then we can make some decisions about how to move forward.
Do you recommend culturing all mares? Because that's a question I see a lot, like on social media and stuff, is there's a kind of contradiction about culturing a mare, a maiden mare or not. Do you guys recommend that?
Well, some of that depends. Some stallion owners require that. So if it's a condition of the breeding contract, yes. I think we're doing less and less live cover mares. I used to do a lot of thoroughbred mares, which is all live cover, and we cultured all of them. With the artificial insemination and the advent of good ultrasounds, a lot of times you can tell by the ultrasound and what's going on with the ovary. If the mare, doesn't look right, then we need to culture.
I think the rule of thumb would be, generally, we do not culture maiden mares, and it's sort of a fielder's choice, or it's the option whether we culture a mare that's had foals before. Typically, when they show up to us, if your mare has got some breeding history, we will culture her as a matter of course on that first heat. Bearing in mind, most cultures are negative, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
What is culturing a mare? I don't know if I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Swab from her uterus, and send it to the lab, and it's grown for organisms, bacterial organisms.
So when your mare is in heat, we'll introduce culture swabs through the vulva into the uterus via the cervix, and take a swab of the inside of the uterus, and then send that to the lab. And in that swab, we will look at the cytology, meaning the cells that are in the uterus, as well as we'll plate it and see if anything grows bacteria-wise.
That makes sense.
Perfect. So now if I know my mare is cycling, and you and I have talked, and we know in 2 weeks we're going to be breeding her, and her culture was clean if you advised to get one, what's the next step then?
Okay, let's talk about if she's living at the repro center.
Okay.
And also if we're using fresh cooled semen, which a lot of stallions only collect on every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is fairly typical, then we don't want the mare to come into heat when we cannot get semen. So on the weekend, we can't get semen shipped. We can get semen on Saturday, but we can't get semen on Sunday, with exceptions, easily. And we can't get semen on Monday easily. So we try to get them to cooperate and be in heat at an appropriate time. So a lot of times we'll cycle the mares with hormones to have them come into heat when we want them to, and so that we could check them during the week, determine when they're ready to have the semen shipped, and have the semen shipped so that it can be shipped FedEx overnight and not have to have a more expensive way to ship it.
Yes. So how many ultrasounds are we up to at this point in the process? Do you feel like, what's the average, just for people listening? How many times have they taken their horse to the vet?
A lot of that's luck of the draw, but I usually figure my average number of ultrasounds per heat cycle would be about between 5 and 7.
Oh, okay. That's a great number. Yeah. So that just gives people an idea of the time commitment and financial commitment that they're into at this point before they've even, checked for a pregnancy.
Perfect. Heat cycle, there's usually a few more ultrasounds because you're trying to get the timing right. And then once we've jumped onto the timing, then the following heat cycles don't require as much ultrasounding.
Right. Okay. And so tell us, say we're shipping cooled semen and we've had our mare checked. She's coming into heat. You've told us, or you've contacted the stallion owner, because usually vets do that, right? The vet is the middleman for getting the semen coming and stuff like that. Is that true for you guys?
It's either the vet, or if they're at the repo center, it's the breeding manager there.
Right. And then do you have your mare checked and you say, yeah, send the semen tomorrow. And then there's usually a shot you give a mare, correct?
Yes. A lot of times, or most of the time now, once the mare gets to a certain stage, we'll give her an ovulation inducing injection, and they'll ovulate within 24 to 48 hours after that injection, most of them. So we'll most often we'll give that injection after we know the semen's been collected and shipped, so that we haven't speeded things up if they for some reason have a problem on the other end.
Got it. Yeah.
It's not 100%, but it really helps keep mares from hanging on to that follicle too long after we put the semen in her.
Mm-hmm.
I might bring up one thing about the injections with the hormones and manipulating the heat, because this is a question I commonly get is, are the heats as good if you use hormones as a heat without a hormone? And my answer to that is, when the hormones are given at the correct time, the heats are better than a natural heat, because we're all about timing and predictability. So we use these drugs to help us with the timing, help us with the predictability, which lowers the cost to the client because we're not having to ultrasound them as frequently. So I think in the past, sometimes these shots may be administered without thorough ultrasound exams, and then they for sure can backfire on you. But that is more about poor timing than it is about the drug not being effective.
And let me go back to one comment about that you made earlier about a vet that's not doing a lot of reproductive work. I'll have to tell you that when you get to that point, when's the right time to give the drug? When's the right time to order the semen? Most of that just comes from experience. And, especially if you've looked at the mare before, done several ultrasounds on her, you could say, okay, this mare ovulates with a little bit smaller follicle and she goes fast, or this mare goes really slow. And so it kind of becomes a feel. And Mike and I are real lucky because we kind of have the same feeling when we look at each other's ultrasounds.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. And you're right. That's experience. That's just trial and error through the years and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And not all mares are predictable, I would imagine, and do it the way you hope they do.
Mares are like women. The only thing about them is their unpredictability.
Cut that.
Yeah, you can edit that one out.
What could you touch real quick on how you manipulate, like what hormones are used? Because there's hormones to use to slow things down too, right? If you're not quite ready for your mare to come into heat.
Well, correct. We will put the mare, if we want to put the mare in, we would say a slowing pattern or a holding pattern, we might put her on a synthetic progesterone. The one that's most commonly used is Regimate. And if we start your mare on Regimate, that means she's going to stay in that point in her heat cycle until we discontinue the Regimate. So certainly we use that drug to put the mare in a holding phase until we get things timed. And then we can move her through it by withdrawing the Regimate and then administering a prostaglandin shot, which would bring the mare into heat.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So this is also, go ahead, Jerry.
After we withdraw from the Regimate and give a prostate shot, which is usually at the same time, then they're going to come into heat 3 to 5 days later. So we know pretty much where they're at. And it's very useful. That procedure is very useful on mares that are home and can't be teased. I mean, they just don't tease. So we can manipulate we can know when they're supposed to be in heat without the fact that they have a teasing stallion.
We're interrupting you one more time to tell you about 2 more great companies. TightJointsPlus.com. Tight Joints Plus is a joint supplement. It's amazing. We use it on all our horses. We tell everybody to give it a try. I want you to use it because you will know if it's helping your horse in 7 days. What other joint supplement can say that? That's not coming from them. That's coming from me and my personal experience. So you have to give it a try if you feel like your horse needs some help with their joints and mobility, competition, everything. It's just really great products, and they're coming out with more all the time. The other company I want to tell you about is BioStar US. They are not very well known in barrel racing, but they are getting very popular in all the other equestrian sports. They protect our environment while giving us the very best for our horses and dogs. You can also get a consult with them for free to find out what your horse might be missing and what of their supplements will fit best with your feeding program or what your horse is lacking. They will provide you with the very best on the market. So start with them if you can. biostarus.com.
Yeah. So I would assume that you guys recommend, just from what I'm hearing, I'm just absorbing because I know nothing about any of this, so I'm learning a lot. But I would assume that you recommend having mares come and stay at your facility, considering how many times you would have to bring her back and forth as an owner. It seems like a lot. So is that what you guys recommend?
I think it works better. It's easier for the owner. We have better success rate. And in most instances, it ends up being cheaper.
Oh, it does. That surprises me. I would assume it would be more expensive.
Well, when at the Repro Center, we give a discounted farm call and a discounted ultrasound exam because it's easier. The chutes there, it's more like production work. So we can move mares through pretty fast. If we check a mare at home, then we have to set the ultrasound up again. And it's often not the safest for the vet, the safest for the equipment, takes longer to get it done. And plus you get to pay a whole farm call.
That makes sense.
Even though there is a one-time mare station fee for the season, it ends up being cheaper in the long run, not considering time and gas to haul the horse back and forth.
Yeah, well, and if you have a higher success rate, then, that's cheaper anyways.
There's so many variables in this process, from timing to semen shipments to communication issues. The more control we put in one person's hands, meaning the veterinarian or the breeding manager, the better our success rate. And then, of course, like you say, it's cheaper because we're not having to try as much.
Yeah. Good to know.
So this is all for setting your mare up to carry her own baby. What now do you do if you want to transfer that embryo? You know, like what does it take as far as other mares? I know it's a whole different ball game, and there's ways to go about it. There's renting a mare that's at a facility somewhere else and shipping the embryo. Or if you have a couple mares at home that you would let carry this other mare's baby, how do you go? What has to happen to those other mares to make them be able to take an embryo?
So I guess just so everybody really understands what the process is, it's exactly like a surrogate mother in people. So we're taking the baby from the mare and we're putting it into a surrogate. And in this case, we call it a recipient. And the one that we take the embryo from, we call the donor. And really between those two, we want to make sure that the recipient is a good quality breeding mare. So she would need to fall into the things that we've discussed earlier about younger mares, older mares, predictability of foaling. And then it's about timing. And we want the mares to be synchronized in their heat cycle. We could do that with ultrasounding and hormones. And at that point, we'll either use one of the owner's mares as a recipient mare, or we can ship the embryo anywhere in the United States. We generally will put it on an airplane and fly it to the recipient herd, but we can overnight it via FedEx as well. One question I get about that is conception rates. And you would tend to think that it would be better if we transferred the embryo immediately on farm to a recipient mare, but there really is no reduction in live foal rates, whether we ship the mare's embryo or whether we transfer it on farm. So that takes that out of the equation, which is nice.
That's shocking to me.
And then it is pretty amazing that the whole process even works.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in the first place, for sure.
My rule of thumb to owners, if you want to use your own mares, assuming they're of quality, breeding mare, then we need 2 mares for every donor mare. That helps with the timing. You could bring me 1 mare to try and synchronize, but you can imagine if she's not in heat when she needs to be in heat and we're ready to breed the donor mare, then of course we're going to have to skip that heat and then we lose a lot of time and then that costs money. So if we can have at least 2 recipient mares for 1 donor mare, odds of somebody being in the heat at the right time are much higher.
As far as the vet work goes for the recipient mares, it's pretty much the same as the donor mare all right along, because you have to sync them, check them, make sure they're staying on track with that donor mare, everything like that. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's exact same process, except for we're not inseminating the recipient mare. We're just getting her ready to take the embryo.
How long after insemination is there an embryo to try to flush?
So when we're breeding your mare for an embryo transfer, either Dr. Washburn or myself will be watching them closely. We check them every day at that point. When we put the semen in, the clock really starts when the mare ovulates, and we'll check her every day after we've bred her so we know the exact day that she ovulates. And then we will flush that mare or try to recover the embryo 8 days after the ovulation.
And then they can be put into a recipient mare. And then how many days after that transfer do you have what they'd call a pregnancy? Like what's the earliest you can check for that?
Well, you just found that out.
Well, I know, but I saw someone shared an 11-day pregnancy. So can you check them that early at 11 days? I mean, you must be able to.
Yeah, you could check them as early as 11. And at that point, it's just a matter of, is it large enough to visualize with our ultrasound? So
yeah,
if the embryo grows about 3 millimeters a day, 1 day makes a big difference with our ultrasounding. So you will miss a lot of pregnancies if you're relying on 11-day checks, but you can. We will usually wait till 12 days because they're generally quite visible at 12 days.
Oh, interesting.
You find that embryo transfer babies are a little smaller at 11, 12 days than our normal mare?
Not always. It could be either way. They sometimes actually, and I don't really understand why this is, but the baby at a 12 or 13-day preg check may be a little bit larger than a naturally conceived one. So I don't really understand that part of it, but the point is that the embryos could be normally variable in size. And when you're checking that early, you might be checking one that's pregnant, but she just happens to have a small embryo that you can't see at this point. So we wouldn't want to call anybody not pregnant until we were at day 15 or 16.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And how early can you tell if there is, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of variables here, but like if there's some sort of complication, like if there's twins or something like that?
Well, with an embryo transfer, fortunately, we'll know whether there's going to be twins or not, because the embryos in a mare will rarely, if ever, split into identical twins. That'd be 1 in a million. So if we put one embryo in, we know we're looking for one foal.
Gotcha.
But in breeding in general, it's important to do that first preg check around day 14 or 15, and then to follow up a week or 10 days later, because there may be different sized babies in there. And there may be a twin that happened to be one of these smaller ones that we didn't see until another week of growth. And so.
Gotcha. And then at that point, you could easily, I don't know, but can you easily fix that?
We can reduce it down to one reasonably well with very good success.
Yeah.
So confirming your mare and foal is important, A, to check for twins if you didn't do an embryo transfer. And then B, also, so you don't lose time waiting for her to come back and heat. Because if you did it that way, you would be behind the ball if you needed to ship again, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yes. It's just like being on a Ferris wheel. And if you miss it at the bottom of the wheel, when that mare's ready to be bred again, you have to wait another 21 days for that wheel to come around. So it does cost you time.
And that's a great point. What is a mare's normal cycle? Like, how long would you have to wait? 21 days? Is that in between every chance you would have to AI again?
If
you went natural without short cycling.
It's 21 days start to start, or 21 days ovulation to ovulation. And they're usually in heat for 5 to 7 days and out of heat for 16, 15, 16 days.
So your mare, you've gone through all of this and now your mare's pregnant, confirmed pregnant. You went back, you did your 10-day check to make sure everything's good. And then after that, how often does your mare need to see a vet, if at all, before she gives birth?
Well, so after the initial checks, at 14 days and then another one a week later, then we like to check them around 30 to 35 days, because at that point we can see a heartbeat on the baby and then we can confirm that she is in foal. I like to see them again when they're about 60 days in foal to make sure everything's going well. And then again before the first of the year, because they can lose the baby in that early stage and you not know it. And we don't want to go into the beginning of breeding season, assume this mare is going to foal in May and there's nothing in there. We've lost the whole first part of the season.
Yeah.
I think it's important maybe to answer this question. A lot of people think that if you check a mare at 14 days and then you check her again a week or two later and she's not pregnant, it really rarely means that there's something wrong with your mare. It just means that pregnancy, for whatever reason, genetically, a number of different reasons, was not able to move forward. And it's okay to rebreed your mare, and it's not a worry that there's something wrong with the mare or the stallion. There's a normal, we call it embryo loss or resorption rate of about 5% from the day we diagnose your mare to be pregnant to 30 days in foal. So if she happened to resorb the pregnancy in that period of time, it's nice to know about it, because then we have a chance to rebreed your mare. Otherwise, a month goes by or 2 months, and the breeding season can be very quick.
What is the percentage of pregnancy loss after that 30 days? Do you guys know?
Well, I would say 1%, 2%, maybe from a mare that's 65 days in foal to term.
Okay.
It's pretty low.
So that 65-day check's important too, then, it sounds like.
that's kind of the mile marker we use. Okay, we probably won't check this mare again this year unless a problem arises.
Okay.
And so once you have done all of that and you're in the new year and you have your the beginning of the year check, right? Is what you said, you would check her at the beginning of the year?
Well, there are some vaccines that we administer during their pregnancy that help reduce the embryo loss.
Mm-hmm.
So we will probably, the next time we might see your mare is at the 5th month of pregnancy. And at that point, we would administer a vaccine called Pneumabort, which prevents, it helps reduce the incidence of a mare developing a respiratory virus that causes the fetus to abort.
Okay. And then, so sorry, go ahead.
One of the reasons that I often check the mares first part of December is I do a lot of Arab mares, and their sweepstake money is due in December, and they don't want to be paying sweepstakes money, nomination fees for an empty uterus. So that's just kind of something we've started doing to make sure that, let's check them before they pay their sweepstakes money.
Smart, for sure. And so once they've kind of gotten through the pregnancy, it's been successful so far. How do you feel about people either having their mares foal at home or having them sent to you guys to foal them out?
I usually tell people it depends what the value of a night's sleep is. A lot of people at home, and for sure, mares foal on their own without our assistance all the time. Mm-hmm. It is less stressful for the owner, and it's a more controlled environment if they come to the breeding center and we foal them out there. Jerry and I both live near there, and we have people on the premises 24/7. And we're watching your mare with a camera in the stall, as well as we've got a foaling alert system in place if your mare begins to foal and somebody's not watching. So it's a lot more controlled, and I would say your likelihood of having a healthy baby at birth is higher in our facility. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it at home, and a lot of people like to do that. It's just you're less likely to have a proper facility, and you're for sure going to lose a lot of sleep.
And there's a number of clients that just can't have somebody there 24/7. I mean, they got to work for a living. Yeah. And so there's long periods of time when the mare does not have observation. So I think the 24-hour availability of somebody watching the mare is important. And like Mike said, we've got cameras on the mares all the time that go to both our computers, phones, so we can see what's going on. When the foal alert goes off, it first goes to Bethany's, the breeding manager's phone, and she lives just across the driveway from the foaling stall. Mm-hmm. And then it goes to Dr. Howell's phone, to my own phone. And I usually attend every foaling via video. So the foal alert will go off, and I'll turn on my iPad and I'll watch the foaling, and I can communicate with Bethany if she has questions, or if I see something and I think some little suggestion I would give to her. So usually, I'm observing pretty much every foaling. And, we don't have that technology at most people's houses.
Yeah. Understandably so.
So you mentioned vaccines, but then we kind of jumped over to the end. But the vaccines are an important part of owning a mare and getting a healthy baby. And what are isn't there a timeline for vaccines for pregnant mares?
Yeah, the Pneumabort is given at 5, 7, and 9. There are some research in some of the bigger farms back east where they recommend starting at 3. So it's basically every 2 months, starting at 3 to 4 months until just before she foals. And that helps prevent from the rhinovirus abortions.
Any other vaccines that they should get right before? Does the milk or colostrum give the baby anything? If you like tetanus, for instance, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I like to give the mare a full set of vaccines right before she foals. So like 30 days, around 30 days, 2 weeks to 4 weeks before she foals. And that increases the levels of antibody in the colostrum. And the foal gets all of its antibody protection from the colostrum. There is no significant antibody crossing the placenta like there is in a lot of other animals. And so their antibody protection comes from the colostrum. So that's something we probably need to touch on at some point after we get the baby delivered.
Well, that could be a whole nother podcast, baby care and mother care right after delivery. But I thought, the vaccines are important. Then I think they have to be a dead virus too, or a specific type of vaccine. Is that accurate?
Well, I guess I would say probably we get this question a lot. Does some owners vaccinate their horses, or some veterinarians are not familiar with what can be given to a pregnant mare? But in general, all the vaccines and dewormers that you get a hold of are safe for the pregnant mare. So most of the vaccines we use these days are what we call killed or attenuated vaccines, viral vaccines. There's not really many, if any, live virus vaccines around anymore that we wouldn't use regularly in a pregnant mare. So it is safe to deworm your mare when she's pregnant, and it is safe to give her routine vaccines while she's pregnant. We just don't have an issue with those.
Is there any guidelines to deworming?
Plus the anti-abortion vaccine. That's different than the regular vaccines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just talking about like their regular vaccines yearly.
Yeah, I get questions about, well, we're not supposed to give West Nile, or we're not supposed to vaccinate for encephalitis, and those things are really fine. Just as with people, there's lots of conversation about what may or may not be correct, but we stick with the science and we stick with what's proven, and those are the case for all of these vaccines. At this point, they're all safe.
What about worming? Should you worm a mare just before they give birth, or does that matter so much? Or
I like to worm the mares, when they get their pre-foaling vaccines, or have them wormed, because very shortly after the baby is born, he'll start nibbling on the mare's manure. And so we don't want a lot of parasite eggs coming out in that manure and infesting the baby.
I didn't know that, so that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I've answered or asked all my questions. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so I know that obviously there are so many different options and variables and all of that, but I think that a lot of people want to breed a mare, but they can't figure out how much it's going to cost, or they just assume that they can't afford it because there are all of these steps involved. And so I want to know, like, what is the average amount that somebody needs to spend to take all of the necessary steps and precautions for getting their mare bred?
Not including a stallion fee.
Not including a breeding fee.
You can find that information easily. How much? Yeah. But it's, the shipping cost, the collection cost, they might not know. And then on the mare side of it, owning the mare.
Yeah.
Well, I usually tell people, that's really a tough number to nail down, because some of it is the luck of the draw. If we happen to check your mare and she's ready to breed, there's minimal work and we breed her and she gets pregnant, and then that works out just great. I usually tell people, for veterinary expenses, be prepared to spend between $2,500 and $3,500. It might go a little bit under that, it might go a little bit over that. We discuss it as we move along. But they do not get 100% pregnancy rate every time you breed them. That makes it difficult to really nail that figure down. But if somebody's comfortable with that sort of budget, we'll probably get most of your mares pregnant, unless there's an issue with the mare. She's either a behavioral issue where we have to sedate them a lot, or maybe their mare doesn't get pregnant because she's an older, more difficult, challenging mare. And we'll talk to you about that before we get started. If we feel like our success rate's going to be low and our expenses are going to be high, make sure you're on board for trying that.
That was actually my second question, was like, Well, Jerry knows I have like if I wanted to breed Prim, Jerry, it would be very difficult. She is not easy, especially for vets. So I wanted to know, like, do you even take horses like that? How much more expensive would it be? Is there less of a success rate? Things like that.
So let's use Prim as an example. Prim, I've done Prim in the chute. Prim sedates really well, and when she's sedated, she's good in the chute. So other than the cost of the sedation, then I don't think there's a huge other additional issue.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that would worry me about a behavioral mare like that is what's she going to be like with the baby. She may be really nasty with the baby, or she may be, that motherhood hormone may kick right in and change her whole personality.
Yeah.
So, it really depends on the mare.
Is there a point where you would recommend just not breeding the mare at all?
When people say the mare flunked out of the show ring or has terrible behavior, so we're going to make a brood mare out of her, that's the worst reason in the world.
Yeah.
If it seems like it's going to be unduly dangerous for the veterinarian or the mare, because this process can be dangerous for your mare, we will talk to you about that, and we may decline to work on the mare. Because we're all about safety for us, the owners, and the mares. We don't want to hurt an animal in this process, and we don't want them to be unduly stressed. It's just not worth moving forward. So those would be some occasions that we might recommend you don't breed your mare.
Yeah. I just wonder, because I just know there's a lot of people out there that have nasty mares. Mares can be nasty.
People underestimate the heritability of behavior. If your mare has a behavioral issue, it's very likely that the foal is going to have the same personality.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to consider that. Not everyone comes out that way, but certainly a lot of them come out with aggressive foals if they're an aggressive mare.
And that goes back to my don't breed fault to fault. If you've got an aggressive mare, you certainly want to breed her to a well-behaved stallion.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd even gamble.
I don't know if I'd, yeah.
So it's February in Washington. Foals are starting to be born. What do you guys recommend for bedding for a foal or a foaling stall? What do you guys use there at Lervix?
We use straw.
Straw, is that kind of the universal go-to?
I think the biggest thing is clean walls, clean bedding, disinfecting the stall as much as possible. You don't want the foal to be born in a dirty environment.
Yeah. And then what, go ahead, Mike.
That part of it's pretty simple. A lot of people wonder, well, the straw must be magical. But it's really not. If you have fine shavings and a wet foal, you're going to have a little ugly looking meatball that is all rolled up in the shavings, right? So the straw really does just help things from clinging to a wet baby. We rapidly change them over to shavings after the straw, but the straw is really there just because it doesn't cling to the baby as much as shaving.
I heard somebody told me once that it was, sorry, go ahead.
A little more insulation when the baby's first born too. The straw, better than wet bedding. There's quite a bit of moisture or water fluid that comes out of the mare when she foals, and the baby laying in that on wet shavings is, can chill. With the straw, it's a little easier to insulate them.
That makes sense. Yeah. Somebody told me once it was because they're not supposed to breathe in the shavings. Clearly it wasn't a vet.
Well, that would be a good idea, but it's not a common cause of foal disease for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now pregnant mares, what is about to foal or within a month or two of foaling? What would you consider abnormal? Something to kind of maybe consult a vet about for your mare's behavior, the way they look? I don't know.
Well, for sure, mares that are having colic-like symptoms before foaling, we should talk to you about that. Mares that come into the milk early, like more than 2 weeks before their due date, we should know about that. a mare that's got a significant vaginal discharge, pre-foaling, we should probably know about those things.
Is there any like taking their temperature? I've heard myths that like their temperature drops way down right before they foal, or I don't know. Is there anything like that to watch out for if your mare's acting kind of weird?
Well, people will try. There's a lot of things that people will do: measure milk pH, check body temperatures, but you really won't know when your mare is going to foal until a foal is coming out. They're that good at concealing it. Some mares, with our breeding manager, she's familiar with how the mare behaves and is watching them regularly. She'll probably have a pretty good idea the night that the baby's going to come. But otherwise, mares have developed as a prey animal, so they learn not to telegraph when they're going to be in a vulnerable state. Mm-hmm. And so that probably brings up a good thing about foaling at home, because everybody wants to watch the process, and a mare can delay her foaling if she's under environmental stress. Meaning, if you're in the stall trying to watch that mare foal, the minute you go to the bathroom, she's gonna foal. And that's not just a coincidence. The mare does have a way to regulate things to control, within hours when she might foal. And so that can make it frustrating for people that are monitoring their mares excessively.
It's amazing how many times we hear that story. They're up all night with them for days and days and days, and they go in the house and to go to the bathroom and get a cup of coffee to come back out and the foal's born.
Yeah.
Very common.
I once slept when I was young, we had a friend whose mare was having a baby, and I was like 12. So of course, me and my friend wanted to see it. We slept in a tack room for 5 days, and that mare did not have her baby while we were watching. So,
cameras have been really nice.
Yeah.
From your bed or your couch, and the mare isn't stressed about it. So since all these wireless cameras have become pretty inexpensive, you can watch them on your phone. It's a way better option than to have the mare know you're present when they're
yeah. That makes sense. So hopefully a few people have decided to use you guys because of this podcast. That's our goal. How do they get in contact with you?
They can call us at Evergreen Equine at the office. They can call Lervick Arabians and speak with Bethany, the breeding manager, directly. They can call us on our cell phones if they're familiar with us.
So yeah, if they don't, we're not going to give out your personal cell phone number.
No,
so
it's not a good idea.
So we'd probably send them to the website then, Evergreen Equine Vet. Is it evergreenequinevet.com?
Yeah, and the quick way to get there would be eevp.net. So either way, you'll get.
All right, we will make sure that we post that too. That's awesome. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you guys feel like you get a lot of questions about?
I think you guys did a great job covering all the bases, and if we've got individual questions from this podcast, and if you guys want to call us up and pick our brains, we're happy to do that. We're excited about the breeding season. This is kind of what we do, and we look forward to working with you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for giving up your morning, and this is your busy time of year.
Yeah, so we're very thankful, and I think you probably answered every question I could ever have about breeding a mare, and that is coming from somebody who knows nothing about it. So hopefully it helps.
The phone number for the Repro Center is 425-877-9603.
Oh, that's great. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And you guys are in Sylvania, Washington, so Northwest Washington. Evergreen Equine Vet is a Snohomish veterinary clinic, but you guys kind of service, how far north do you go?
Well, we get clients from the Repro Center that haul in from all over Washington State. Our practice goes up into the north part of Mount Vernon and extends down to Issaquah region.
But definitely the best bet for this stuff is if the mare comes to you.
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
We do all of our breeding at the reproduction center.
Yeah. And you guys even will collect stallions there and stuff for stallion owners too, right?
Correct. Yep. We could do another podcast about that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Kaylee and I had this talk. We have to stick to,
Yeah.
we have to choose, or this could go on for hours. So, but yeah, that would definitely be a podcast for the future because stallion owners are popping up everywhere now. It's the thing to try.
Yikes. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about before you go down that road.
No kidding. So maybe that will be one for the future. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for my little baby that's cooking. And I'll be working with you again throughout this season. So I really value your guys' input and expertise. And we think everybody that listens to this will get a lot from it. So thank you and have a great day. Go make more babies.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Please leave us a review and share this episode with your friends.
Also, if you want to learn more about WSBRI, go visit our website. It is www.wsbri.org. And go check out our Facebook and Instagram. Give us a follow. It is WA State BRI. That's WA State BRI is our handle. Thanks for listening.